they're battling each other. You got to look back at it when time passes and you look and you say, you've said things that agitated each other to the point that you might have wanted to run into each other.
50 Cent just dropped explosive new evidence about the murders of Tupac and Biggie, and it completely flips the story we thought we knew. His Netflix docuseries exposes hidden gang alliances, industry interference, unreleased police audio from Keith D, and insiders claiming the East-West feud was never just about rappers. It was a proxy war fueled by real money, real agendas, and real power. Once those secret recordings surface, the murders stop looking like random street hits and start looking orchestrated from the shadows. So imagine this. After nearly 30 years of silence, confusion, conspiracy theories, and unanswered questions, one of hip-hop's most influential voices suddenly decides to pull back the curtain on two of the most iconic unsolved cases in music history. That voice is Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, and this time, he's not holding anything back. That on December 2nd, 2025, 50 Cent released a bombshell multi-part Netflix series that is sending shockwaves through hip-hop culture and beyond. The series dives deep into the killings of Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G., two legends whose lives were brutally cut short at the height of their influence. It's been nearly 28 years since Christopher Wallace Biggie Smalls was murdered in Los Angeles on March 9, 1997. And just 6 months before that, on September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur died from a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. These weren't just artists, they were cultural architects, voices for the unheard, figures whose reach extended far beyond the studio. For decades, literally decades, fans have been in Reddit threads, YouTube rabbit holes, podcasts, group chats, and documentaries trying to figure out what actually happened. Who pulled the trigger? Was it a gang retaliation? Was it an inside job? Was the music industry secretly pulling strings? Thousands of theories, endless speculation, zero closure. Until now, enter 50 Cent, executive producer and industry insider who has never feared controversy. His series brings together testimony from music executives, label insiders, and people who witnessed the chaos firsthand. He reveals archival footage that has never been released, police recordings that were buried for years, and accounts that paint a darker, more calculated picture of what was really happening behind the scenes. This isn't just another documentary. This is a raw, unfiltered dive into the machinery that powered the most dangerous era in hip-hop. Episode 2 goes straight for the throat, focusing entirely on the murders. It features testimony from Kirk Burroughs, Bad Boy co-founder, Mark Curry, Bad Boy artist, and Roxanne Johnson, ex-wife of Craig Mack. These aren't outsiders. They were embedded in the culture, connected to the labels, and aware of the pressure, rivalries, and high-stakes politics that was shaping everything. One of the most chilling themes of the documentary is the idea that the East Coast versus West Coast beef didn't just escalate, evolved into something far more sinister. A secret proxy war involving real gangs, real money, and real consequences. And according to the evidence shown, it may have been the force that set both murders in motion. We're talking about the Crips allegedly aligning themselves with East Coast interests and the Bloods backing the West Coast. This wasn't just rap beef expressed through diss tracks, interviews, or magazine headlines. This was real-world violence with real-world consequences, and the documentary makes a compelling case that these gang affiliations played a direct, defining role in both murders. Kirk Burroughs, now older, wiser, and far removed from the chaos of the 90s, offers one of the documentary's most haunting insights. With maturity and distance, he says it becomes almost impossible to ignore the orchestration behind Tupac's death. He explains how, right after Tupac was shot in Las Vegas, there was enormous pressure inside the music industry to keep business moving, keep promoting albums, keep pushing tours, keep feeding the machine. He specifically recalls how Biggie was pushed, some might even say pressured or outright coerced into traveling to Los Angeles to promote life after death. And this was at a time when everyone knew LA was hostile territory, the epicenter of the East-West tension. Biggie himself understood the danger. According to multiple voices in the series, he didn't want to go. He wasn't naive. He wasn't reckless, knew the vibes were off. But the label, the schedule, the business demands, all of it outweighed basic safety. Burroughs bluntly suggests that Biggie was effectively ushered into a death trap, sacrificed the industry's obsession with profits, momentum, and in that era, album sales. That's how the tragedy of March 9th became almost inevitable. But the series doesn't stop at commentary. It presents what it describes as hard evidence, specifically the newly surfaced audio recordings of Dwayne Keith D. Davis, a Southside Crips member arrested in 2023 and now awaiting trial for Tupac's murder. These recordings, captured during a 2008 proffer session essentially protected, immunity-based interview feature Keith D giving a chilling first-person account of the night Tupac was shot.in the tapes, which are now central pieces of evidence in his case. Keith D describes in vivid detail everything that happened on September 7th, 1996. He recounts how earlier that night, a violent fight broke out at the MGM Grand. Tupac and his entourage, including Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight, confronted Orlando Anderson, Keith D's nephew. This wasn't a random scuffle. Anderson was allegedly involved in robbing a Death Row associate weeks earlier. And when Tupac spotted him in the casino, retaliation was immediate. The confrontation exploded fast, and that single moment set the stage for the deadly chain of events that followed.
I got the Life After Death double CD dropping March 25th.
What Davis describes next is nothing less than the blueprint of a revenge killing. He lays out how, after the MGM Grand assault, he and his crew Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Dre Smith, and driver Terrence T-Bone brown-armed themselves and went hunting for retaliation. Their first stop was Club 662, where Tupac was supposed to perform that night. They parked outside with guns ready, waiting for a moment that never came. After nearly 90 minutes of sitting in the dark, tension rising, they gave up and headed to a liquor store, and that's when fate stepped in with brutal precision. On the way, they spotted Tupac's black BMW rolling down the street pack, leaning out the passenger window, animated, loud, unmistakable, larger than life, a perfect target. Davis says he made a sharp U-turn, pulling alongside the BMW at the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. And this is where his story becomes chillingly detailed. From the front passenger seat, Davis claims he pulled out a .40 caliber Glock and passed it toward the back. According to Davis, Orlando Anderson grabbed a gun and said, "Give it here. I'll shoot." Moments later, he allegedly unloaded multiple rounds into Tupac's vehicle, setting the tragedy in motion.
No. You're back at your own hotel.
We're at the Luxor.
Tupac was hit 4 times twice in the chest, with one round tearing through his lung, once in the arm, and once in the thigh. Suge Knight, behind the wheel, was grazed in the head by flying shrapnel. The white Cadillac disappeared into the night, and 6 days later, on September 13th, 1996, Tupac Shakur died from respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. A voice that defined a generation was gone. A revolution was cut short, and hip-hop would never be the same. To in his audio confession, Davis claims the shooting wasn't just retaliation, it was tied to a bounty. He insists there was money on the table to eliminate both Tupac and Suge Knight, and that his crew only received half of the promised payout because Knight survived. That allegation alone opens a storm of new questions. Who funded such a bounty? Who had the motive, the reach, and the money to put a price on their lives? And was this violence engineered far above the street level, in boardrooms and back offices where power overshadowed loyalty? The documentary is adamant. This wasn't random gang chaos. It was calculated. It was structured, and based on the testimonies and evidence presented, it was part of a broader arc of escalating violence born from industry rivalries, territorial battles, and the poisonous cocktail of ego, money, and power that defined 90s hip-hop. The series argues convincingly that what began as artistic competition and label beef spiraled into something much deadlier, a world where reputations became weapons, bullets became messages, and the consequences were irreversible. Now let's step back and examine the moment where everything shifted, the night that changed the trajectory of music forever. To understand how tragedy unfolded, we need to retrace the exact sequence of events in Las Vegas. Because this night wasn't supposed to end in bloodshed, it started as a celebration. September the 7th, 1996 began with excitement in the air. Mike Tyson, the baddest man alive, was set to fight Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand. It was a heavyweight title match that attracted celebrities, athletes, industry power players, and anyone who wanted to be close to the spectacle. Tupac arrived with Suge Knight and members of the Outlaw G's brothers, his day ones, people bound to him by loyalty and history. The fight itself was shockingly brief. Tyson demolished Seldon in just 109 seconds. But what happened after that fight? There was a moment that reshaped everything. As Tupac and his entourage moved through the MGM Grand Casino lobby, Trayvon Trey, Lamar Pyro Blood, and Death Row affiliates suddenly spotted Orlando Anderson. This wasn't some random encounter. Earlier that year, Anderson, a Southside Compton Crip, had allegedly taken part in a Foot Locker robbery in Lakewood, California, where Lane was jumped and stripped of his gold Death Row medallion. That humiliation ignited a firestorm of tension between the Crips and the Blood connected, directly or indirectly, to the hip-hop industry.so when Lane pointed Anderson out to Tupac. That's a guy who robbed me. Pac didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. He didn't stall. He reacted instantly. Surveillance footage, dissected in countless documentaries and investigations, shows Tupac throwing the first punch, dropping Anderson to the floor. Suge Knight and the rest of the crew immediately joined in, turning the confrontation into a quick but furious beatdown. Security intervened. The two groups split, and everyone went their separate ways. But here's the truth about the code of the streets. Public disrespect demands a response. And Anderson's humiliation on that casino floor wasn't something that would be ignored or forgiven. What most people don't realize, and what the documentary emphasizes, is how fast the retaliation machine kicked into gear. According to Keith Diaz's own accounts, told repeatedly across a 2008 police proffer interview, his 2019 memoir Compton Street Legend, media appearances, and grand jury testimony, the plan for revenge began almost instantly once word reached him. This wasn't a situation that simmered for days. It was immediate. Our guy got jumped. We're handling this tonight. Meanwhile, EDI, meaning the Outlaws, who was driving directly behind Tupac's BM, shared a perspective that is both vivid and heartbreaking. He describes the vibe, the energy, the feeling that this was supposed to be just another wild night in Vegas. They were headed to Club 662, where Tupac was scheduled to perform. The excitement was real. The adrenaline was high. This was a live fast, loud, and invincible. But beneath that excitement were warning signs that became painfully obvious in hindsight.e.d.I. Recalls how Yaki Gaddafi, another Outlaws member who would be killed just 2 months later in an unrelated shooting, leaned forward and asked their security guard, Frank Alexander, a simple but crucial question: "You got your gun, right?" Frank said no. Vegas police had warned them earlier that night that anyone caught carrying a weapon would be arrested on the spot. Gaddafi became visibly frustrated. He could feel the danger in the air. He understood, perhaps better than anyone in that moment, just how vulnerable they really were.
It's a strong dude, Joe. I know Duke, you know what I'm saying?
Very
He's real strong. So when they was like he got shot, I was just more like, again? You know what I'm saying? He always getting shot or shot at. He gonna pull through this one again, make a few records about it, and it's gonna be over, you know what I'm saying? But when he died, I was just like, oh.
What Davis describes next is nothing short of a blueprint for a revenge killing. He recounts how, after the MGM Grand altercation, he and his crew Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Dre Smith, and driver Terrence T-Bone brown-armed themselves and set out to retaliate. Their first stop was Club 662, where Tupac was scheduled to perform that night. They parked outside, guns ready, scanning for their target, but after nearly 90 tense minutes, Tupac never appeared. Frustrated and restless, they abandoned the stakeout and drove toward a nearby liquor store, and that's when fate intervened in the most brutal way. On the street, they spotted Tupac's black BMW, Pac unmistakably visible, leaning out the passenger window, larger than life, radiating energy and charisma. A perfect target. Davis says he made a sharp U-turn, bringing their white Cadillac alongside the BMW at the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. And this is where his account becomes chillingly precise. From the front passenger seat, Davis pulled out a .40 caliber Glock and handed it toward the back. According to him, Orlando Anderson grabbed the weapon and said, "Give it here. I'll shoot." Moments later, Anderson allegedly fired multiple rounds into Tupac's vehicle, setting the night's tragedy into motion. These weren't random acts of violence. These were orchestrated hits, part of a larger cycle of retaliation and proxy warfare. The actual players weren't just street-level gang members. They potentially included people with deep pockets, industry connections, and the motive and means to fund such attacks. While the series doesn't definitively identify every person who pulled the strings, it presents a compelling narrative that makes it impossible to view these murders as isolated incidents of gang violence. And yet, the unresolved mystery looms larger than ever. Here's where it gets complicated, controversial, and frustrating for anyone who has followed these cases for decades. Despite confessions like Keith Diaz, witness testimonies, and decades of investigations by multiple law enforcement agencies, Biggie's murder remains unsolved. Tupac's case only saw its first arrest in 202,327 years